Lucas grew up in a small village where the land was all people had. Everything revolved around the crops, from the first ray of sunlight to the last exhausted breath at dusk. His father spent the entire day in the fields, and his mother helped with the harvest and took care of the house. From a young age, Lucas learned that life was a constant struggle. There was no rest, there were no choices, only work. No matter how hard they tried, money was never enough. The little they harvested was sold for a ridiculous price to the resellers, who came from the cities. They pay whatever they want, and we have no choice, the elders used to say. Lucas heard that since he was a child, and over time he learned to accept it. It went on like that until he turned 18, when everything got worse. His mother fell ill. At first it was just tiredness. Then came the fever and the weakness. She could no longer get out of bed. Despair took over the house. The piece of land they had was small, which limited their options even more. The family's crops consisted only of greens, carrots, and some fruits that had to be sold quickly before they spoiled. The money they earned barely allowed them to survive. Every cent was counted to buy rice, beans, and pay for basic bills. His mother's medicine was far too expensive, and every time they went to the pharmacy in the city, they came back unable to buy everything she needed. His father would spend the nights sitting by the door of the house, staring into the dark fields as if searching for an answer in the earth. Lucas felt the same anguish. Working more wasn't the solution, but it was the only thing they knew how to do. The next day, a neighbor heard about his mother's illness and decided to visit them. When she saw how weak she was, unable to get out of bed, a look of concern took over her face. She then pulled Lucas aside and, with a firm voice full of compassion, said, "You need to do more than help your father in the field. Go to the city and try to find a job. That way you can bring more money home." When Lucas heard that, a deep tightness grew in his chest. He could barely talk to the people in his own village. He had dropped out of school at 12, and he was shy, embarrassed, and extremely simple. He didn't know how to do anything besides farming. Who would give someone like me a job? The idea of looking for work felt impossible. But deep down, he knew he had to do something, or his mother might not make it. That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. The neighbor's gaze, filled with both concern and expectation, echoed in his mind. You need to do more. Just thinking about looking for a job made his heart tighten, and a deep anguish grew inside him like a massive weight pressing on his shoulders. His mother was getting worse every day. His father was working himself to death. And him, trapped, not knowing what to do. He felt suffocated, as if the world was closing in around him. He couldn't go on like this. Something had to change. But what? How? That's when, in the middle of all that anguish, a thought struck his mind like a lightning bolt. What if the problem isn't the lack of money, but the way we're trying to earn it? For a moment, his chest opened. It was as if something inside him had sparked a small flame. He couldn't explain it. He had no answers, no idea how it would work, but for the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe, there was a way. He went to sleep with that idea echoing in his mind. The next morning, while helping his father in the field, Lucas began to look at the vegetables and fruits in a different way. They had always been there, they were their livelihood, but what if they could be worth more? He remembered the elders' words in the village. The markets pay what they want. That's just how it is. No one's going to pay more for food. It's always been this way. But what if they didn't need to sell to the markets? What if they sold directly to people? The idea seemed absurd. No one in the village did that. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Just the day before, his father had sold lettuce and carrots to the resellers for a ridiculously low price. Lucas then asked himself, what if I sold those same vegetables directly to the people in the city? The thought made him tremble. He was shy. He had never known how to communicate well. Just imagining himself knocking on someone's door and trying to sell something made the shame consume him. How could he convince anyone to buy from him if he could barely start a conversation? But at the same time, something inside him told him he needed to try. He didn't know if it would work, but he had nothing to lose. That afternoon, Lucas grabbed an old basket, tied it to the back of his rusty bicycle, and filled it with some vegetables and fruits from the field. His racing heart betrayed his insecurity. Would people laugh at him? Would anyone buy? But there was no time for doubt. His mother needed the medicine. He got on the bike and left. The dirt road was long, and the sun burned his face as he pedaled toward the city. Fear and uncertainty weighed more than the basket full of produce strapped to the bike. When he reached the first street, he stopped in front of a modest house. His heart was pounding. He had never sold anything directly to anyone before. He took a deep breath, got off the bike and knocked on the door. An elderly woman answered. "Good afternoon, Mom. I'm Lucas. I live in the nearby village. I brought some fresh vegetables from my family's field. Would you like to buy some?" She looked at him with suspicion and replied, "But I buy from the market, and it's cheaper." Lucas swallowed hard. It was exactly what the elders in the village always said, but he couldn't give up so quickly. "Yes, but have you noticed how the vegetables from the market sometimes arrive wilted? I picked these this morning. They're much fresher, and if you'd like, I can bring them straight to your door every week." The woman hesitated for a moment, picked up one of the lettuces, felt the texture and nodded, satisfied. "How much is it?" Lucas gave the price, which was slightly higher than the market's. She thought for a few seconds and, to his surprise, replied, "Give me 2 lettuces and some carrots." The first sale. Lucas felt a wave of joy take over him. It wasn't much, but someone had paid for what he brought. He took the money and went to the next house. The first few days were tough. Many doors didn't open. Some people laughed at the idea, but others bought. Some complimented the quality of the produce. Others liked the idea of receiving it at home. Over time, he noticed a pattern. The people who bought were those who valued fresh food and the convenience of not needing to go to the market. And little by little, he began to understand something no one in the village had ever thought about. It wasn't just about growing food. It was about knowing who to sell it. To each day, Lucas returned home with a little more money in his pocket. It still wasn't enough to change his life, but it was already enough to buy the first medicines for his mother. As the weeks passed, Lucas got to know his customers better. He understood which vegetables sold the most, who preferred fruits, and who liked to receive everything ready in neatly packed bags. He also learned how to adjust prices. He noticed that some people paid more without complaining, while others bargained to pay less. But the most important thing was that he was managing to sell, and directly to the ones who would eat it. The money started coming in. For the first time, his mother was able to take the proper medicine without having to ration the doses. His father, initially skeptical about the idea of selling directly, began to realize that his son was right. "You're really managing to sell those vegetables at higher prices?" he asked one evening, as he watched Lucas count the days. "Money. People pay for convenience and quality, Dad. They don't want to go to the market and buy bad produce." His father fell silent, thinking. All his life, he had believed that no one would ever pay more for the village's products. But now, his own son was proving otherwise. At first, the other farmers laughed at the idea. "So now you're a door-to-door salesman," one of them mocked. But over time, the laughter faded and was replaced by curiosity. Lucas began to sell more and more. Some people started placing orders in advance. Others asked if he sold other types of food. Then, something unexpected happened. The farmers themselves began coming to him. "Lucas, do you think you could sell some of my tomatoes too?" one old man asked. "If I send some fruits along, Do you think they'd sell? Asked another. Lucas realized that unintentionally he had created a new business model. Now it wasn't just him selling his vegetables, he began selling for his neighbors too. He took a small percentage from each sale and increased his own income. What began as a desperate attempt to save his mother had become a new path for the entire village, and for the first time, they were breaking the cycle of poverty. With his mother's health restored, Lucas and his father decided that the leftover money wouldn't be wasted. They didn't buy new clothes or furniture for the house. Every cent was saved for one goal, only to fulfill Lucas's dream. He knew he could no longer depend on the bicycle. Demand was high, and every day he made the trip between the village and the city under the hot sun, going back and forth up to 4 times to fetch more produce. Then, after saving for a while, he was finally able to get his driver's license. And soon after came his greatest achievement, his first van. Now Lucas could carry much more at once. Besides fruits and vegetables, people in the village started sending cakes, homemade bread, cheese and sweets. His van became known all over the city. Over time, the business grew even more. Lucas learned about markets, about demand, about how to turn a simple delivery into a large-scale operation. 20 years later, Lucas's story became an inspiration. Today, he owns several hectares of land, with rice, corn, and various other crops that supply the entire region. He became one of the richest men in the city. His parents, who once lived in scarcity, now have an extremely comfortable and worry-free life. Lucas's van still exists to this day. He no longer needs to go door to door. Now, one of his employees handles the deliveries. From his office, Lucas oversees everything, managing a business that grew far beyond anything he ever imagined. But every time he sees that van driving through the streets of the city, he feels a quiet pride, remembering where he came from and everything he built. Lucas's story taught us that the heart is our guide. When everything seems hopeless, the answer is always within us. It is the heart that connects us to God and shows us the way, even when logic says it's impossible. Life only changes for those who have the courage to change. If Lucas had accepted the same old rules, nothing would have happened. But he chose to take a risk, to take a step even without guarantees. And that changed everything. Rules only exist until someone breaks them. They said no one would ever pay more for vegetables, that there was no other way. But that was only true because no one ever tried. The impossible only exists until someone proves otherwise. What we already have might be enough. Lucas didn't need more land or more money. He just needed to see differently and use what he already had in a new way. Sometimes the solution is already right in front of us. We just need to open our eyes. Small decisions create big transformations. It all started with a bicycle and a basket of vegetables. Small actions, done with faith and consistency, can take us much farther than we ever imagined. If this story touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Here, you'll always find inspiring stories that open your mind to new possibilities and transform the way you see life.